Fullback belly.
3 tight ends, including Haebner. Kuhn is the fullback with the first and goal. Kuhn gets the ball. Pyle driving his way in for the touchdown. What a great second effort.
Here comes the. Y'all don't really want it like that. Here comes the. Y'all don't really.
Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Fantasy Fullback Dive, brought to you by the good people at the Roto Street Journal. As always, the Fantasy Fullback Dive, paving your way, acting as your lead blocker to fantasy glory, fantasy excellence, hopefully titles so you can brag about us and how we helped you get there. We know you can do it. I'm your host, Nat the Truth Jones. With me, as always, the Wolf of Roto Street himself, and we are in the weeds, like I said yesterday, but we're deeper in the weeds today. We're 3 episodes into our 8-part series, hitting every division. We did the West of the NFC the first day. We did the East yesterday, and now we're coming north to what used to be the NFC Central. Now is the NFC North. We're going to be hitting the Packers. We're going to be hitting the Bears. We're going to be hitting the Vikings, and we're going to be hitting the Lions. And before I introduce my esteemed co-host, I just want to say this information is fluid. It is changing all the time. I made the mistake. All you people that are trying to do a good job, be good professionals, and are trying to get on top of things and do your work early, don't do that. You got to do it in the last minute, because if you prepare 3 days early for a fantasy argument, the chances are there's going to be a lot of changes before that. I've been scrambling. I think I'm up to date. I think I'm going to be able to use the correct projections, the correct rankings, but only time will tell. With all that said, Wolf, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Nat. I've got a great day planned ahead here. Going to go celebrate the 3-year anniversary over there a little bit later. So that's exciting stuff. But, of course, love diving into some football goodness right beforehand. As you said, updating these by the day. And I think that's a really good point to, obviously it's great for all you guys to watch these projections. But if you do want on your draft day, the most up to date with everything that's been happening in the preseason training camp and all that stuff, I am going through daily. I apologize that to make your life a little bit more difficult before these shows. But that's what, you got to, it's going to be a premium offering. It's got to be something that's always up to date like that,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, stock prices from 3 days ago aren't that valuable. Actually, exactly. So probably should have thought of that. I will say, with me going over all the stuff, last minute making changes, I think I'm actually more up to speed on stuff than I would have been otherwise. So there's the silver lining everybody was looking for. You ready to get right into the division, the NFC North?
We shall do it. But right before we do, if you guys don't mind giving this a thumbs up, mean the world to us, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, on Twitter as well. The retweets and likes. They just help us get out to more people, help us get more discovered, and it would mean the world if you like this content, whether you're catching the replay or here live with us. Of course, we'll answer any of your questions as we always do at the end of the broadcast after we breeze through these 4 teams. Let's bring it on in, Nat.
All right, we're going to start alphabetically just to keep it boring. Chicago, the Bears. Definitely had some changes. This is one of the teams I'm worried I might not be all over the way I should as far as the accurate projections. And the main reason I'm concerned is because of the Fields-Dalton quarterback situation. You got some feelings on that. So why don't we start with the team, and then I'll tell you about your projections.
Yeah, I projected it out as a team. Matt Nagy has always been more pass happy. He comes from that Kansas City Andy Reid style offense where he was the offensive coordinator. So I do expect it to be right around 58 to 60% pass to 40 to 42% run, even with David Montgomery emerging as a potential workhorse, a guy he's talked up as 20-plus carries a game. I still think they're going to be relatively pass happy. And this is skewed a little bit more run heavy than I would have normally had it, because I do think, and this is one of the big changes you've seen, I think Justin Fields has taken over this job before week 1. I know they're going to continue to talk about this is Andy Dalton. He's the starter. He's going to be out there week 1. I think at most it's week 1 and he's done. I think this is really going to be the Justin Fields show. So right now I have him projected for 100% of the passing game volume.
All right, and so that's a big change. Literally a few days ago, maybe a week tops, but probably less than that, you had these guys with pretty much identical projected numbers. Yeah. In the 2,200 yards, 300 attempts, 12 touchdowns, and a few picks for each guy. How does it shake out now? What are you looking at right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, as you can see, I had Field taking all 600 of the pass attempts I project for this team, completing 366 of them. He came in as one of the top 5 most accurate passers of the last 5 draft classes. So I like that he's got that accuracy all over the field. I have him eventually throwing for 4,000 yards, 32 touchdowns, 15 inch. You're going to see those rookie mistakes. But the big thing with Fields as well, and we saw this in the preseason game, is the Konami upside. 88 rushes, 440 for 7 touchdowns is the real deal here. He scored 18 points in a quarter of action after the second half. Yeah, it came against second and third stringers. Everybody in the preseason is playing against those. He finally got his legs under him, and we saw how rapidly this guy can elevate the points. So ultimately, I talked about Trey Lance, 2 episodes ago, 1 episode, whatever that one was, as the guy I needed to go get. If I miss on him, then I have to have your guy. Right. I need one of those two. I need one of these 2 rookies, no matter what happens, whether I have a quarterback, whether I don't have one yet, whether they're starting or not. I need one of those 2 on my roster, and heck, if I get both, even better. He's right up there in terms of potential cheat code, potential 2021 Mahomes, Lamar Jackson breakout style quarterback, in my opinion.
All right, I won't waste time with the projection rank versus the big board rank because I was late on that one. But I will say on the big board, you have Fields coming in right around quarterback 14, I think. So borderline starter. And like you said, you're trying to get him or the other guy or both, on your teams in auction. These guys figure to be fairly cheap too.
Yeah, you can see here too, he's actually the QB 10 in my projections now that I've given him the full-time starter status, which again comes from that Konami upside. It's still now, if he does get the starting nod all year, of course that's going to move him above Trey Lance, who I still have as ahead of him, because I think my gut just tells me that guy's going to be the league winner for sure when he takes over. I have a little more question marks on Fields, but if he's named the starter as I am now expecting him to be eventually, before the season, that's going to obviously impact the rankings too.
Sure. All right, let's move on to running back and a guy that has caused us a fair amount of just emotional turmoil, you'd have to say, over the past 2 seasons, and that is David Montgomery, who is the presumed, you'd have to say, bell cow back on the Chicago Bears. Now, you got him projected, I believe, 260 carries for a little over 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns. Not a bad stat line. 37 catches for 270 and a touchdown. That's not that impressive. You actually have Damian Williams, I think, getting right around the same number of catches. But that was good for your 17th ranked running back on projection list. I think you actually bump him slightly to 15 on your big board. What are you thinking about Montgomery? I can see the appeal. It's still a little bit hard for me to get too excited about him, even though we saw, let's face it, he was amazing at the end of last year.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the factors that led to that breakout, Nat, like everyone, he was facing the easiest schedule. Very true. Tariq Cohen was hurt. Very true. But the, I guess, good news for Montgomery and not for Cohen is Cohen still isn't practicing. He's still dinged up. And so all that receiving work could end up going to Montgomery again. Now, Damian Williams is a very adept pass catcher, familiarity with the Chiefs scheme, all that stuff. So I do, as you see in the projections, think they'll split those. But just the fact that Montgomery will see some third downs and some receiving work is a huge boost to his value. Plus the schedule thing, he also has the easiest schedules, as we talked about with Marcus Grant just a week or 2 ago on our podcast. Go check it out if you missed the Strength of Schedule episode. David Montgomery has the easiest schedule among running backs entering this year. So once again, facing a cream puff schedule, Matt Nagy's already come out and said 20-plus carries a week for this guy is more than doable. Well, that would send him into the 300 carry range. So maybe I am being a little conservative with just 260, but I really do think a light switch went off last year. This guy, you see the practice highlights, bowling through tackles, going all over the place. It just seems like the guy we saw in college, we were so hyped about as a rookie, that led us to be so disappointed when he was tentative and tiptoeing behind the line and more lateral. It seems to me like he's finally refound that kind of bull, straight ahead, breaking tackle. I mean, he was leading before Javonte Williams broke the metric. He was leading the Pro Football Focus's broken tackle rate. So, I mean, this guy, we're seeing it finally kind of click. I'm expecting a big, big season. I think he's a fantastic investment in round 3.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. You were answering a question, or I saw it on the website. I honestly don't remember where, but somebody talked about nailing their first 2 picks with just elite stud receivers. And I remember you obviously respected those picks and then came back with David Montgomery would be a great pick to, start your running back stable after solidifying receivers so well. And that actually stuck with me. And I'm possibly going to be taking that into my hometown draft tomorrow.
I think it's a really good point. Whether that means you go Kelsey Adams first round, whether you go receiver, like you're saying.
Ridley, Diggs, something like that.
Right, exactly. Whether it's those guys and then you go bang, bang, running back, and he's your 2. I really think even if you go like Diggs, Hill somehow, if that's, the elite receivers work out and you can have him as your one in that case, like he's a very high floor guy, regardless of where you're sliding him into your lineup.
All right, let's move on to receiver. And a guy that I really like, and I hope my stats are right on him, Allen Robinson. You got him for 100 catches, nice even 100. That makes it easy. 1,230 yards, 9 touchdowns, and you got him getting 150 targets. So I love the round numbers you're using with that, Robinson. That works out to a 67% catch rate. It seems like, I love him. It seems like you kind of do too. You have him ranked as your wide receiver 13 based on projections. You got him as your wide receiver 9, which always betrays your thoughts a little bit, means you kind of sneaky, maybe like him even a little bit more than that. Then you got the second receiver. I'm not sure my numbers are right on him, but you got Darnell Mooney on both lists as their wide receiver 2 in the 40s on both your lists, putting up like 6,900, 6 touchdowns, something like that. We'll see. What do you think? Talk to me about Robinson. Talk to me a little more about Mooney.
Yeah, as you can see here, I've actually been bumping up Mooney a bit based on the hype coming in. 61 catches, 915, 6 TDs. They're saying his releases are looking like Antonio Brown. I know that's hyperbole. Antonio Brown's one of the best at getting off the line of scrimmage that the game has ever seen. But this guy was so impressive, Mooney, last year. And we saw him just running down the field time and time again, wide open, and Foles just sailing it over his head. Trubisky sailing it short. And, it's so painful to watch this guy just run so wide open and have that happen. Justin Fields, as we mentioned, one of the top 5 most deep, accurate passes all over the field, but including deep accuracy coming into the year, one of the top 2 in this class behind only Mac Jones. I really think that's going to be a amazing hookup, him and Mooney, one of the best, like around 9-10 wide receiver investments as your 4th, 5th receiver, especially in best ball too. He's going to have some real spike weeks going deep down the field. Love him. But at the top, as you mentioned, Allen Robinson, who I'm projecting for a nice 25% target share. And that might be conservative. This guy has seen right around 140 to 150 targets in both seasons with the Bears. This is by far the best quarterbacking situation. Even if Andy Dalton played all year, which of course I'm not expecting based on these projections, that would still be the best quarterback Allen Robinson's ever played with. And even with this carousel of shit with Foles, with Trubisky, he's been the wide receiver 8 and 9 since arriving in Chicago because of the volume, the just every down usage. They move him all over the place. The definition of an alpha that is somehow falling to round 3. I get top 10 in back-to-back years, but he's falling outside of like top 12 in a lot of people's rankings. In mid-round 3 pick, you can't get a better target hog than that in round 3, in my opinion.
I'm going to say something that's going to piss you off. I like him as much as Justin Jefferson.
Wow. And you know what, Nat? Like, the track record is certainly even more established with Allen Robinson. I love what Justin Jefferson did
he's awesome.
His first year. So, like, the upside's there to me. But the floor, you could definitely make the argument that the floor is higher with Robinson. And if you went with him instead of Justin Jefferson, like, I wouldn't do that myself, but right. I'm not going to say you're a moron. No, that actually doesn't piss me off nearly as much as you might expect.
I'm not saying I would necessarily take him over, but he's a guy that's going to go substantially after him, and you'd pay a lot less for him in an auction draft, and I don't see them as markedly different. Right.
If you can get A-Rob in an auction for a $5-10 discount, like. Right. That's robbery.
That's what I'm saying.
Robbery. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
All right. We'll talk about Jefferson later in this pod, and I'll tell you some more thoughts on that. Anyway, let's get tight end done real quick. Cole Kmet, and I have no idea if Kmet is the correct pronunciation, but that's what we're going with.
It is.
Okay, Cole Kmet. You got him as your tight end 15, 57 catches, 564, 8 touchdowns. There's the Jimmy Graham, obviously, secondary tight end on the list. And this falls into the Zach Ertz category for me, and a couple other guys are going to fall in that category, which is the guy I'm just waiting for somebody in my draft to pick just so I can have a good chuckle.
What, Jimmy Graham? Yeah.
Someone's going to pick him. He's not going to go undrafted. Someone's going to pick him. Like, oh, Jimmy Graham, he was great 11 years ago.
Exactly. There's always those names that owners are scrambling for the stickers and like, oh, that's a name I recognize, Jimmy Graham. And clearly I'm projecting him to be the number 2 this year. He started giving that back to Cole Kmet. But a lot of people, as you're saying, the common fantasy folk might not recognize that Cole Kmet became their number 1 tight end as a rookie last year. The hardest position to translate as rookies is tight ends. This guy really started to blossom down the stretch there. 6'4", athletic, big hands, like was the number one prospect of last year in the tight end category. And there's just often that natural year 2 leap for rookie tight ends in general. I think that's obviously in Cole Kmet's favor. I think the fact that he's just such a red zone beast, so as you can see, 8 touchdowns toward the top of the position when I'm projecting him for. I don't know that you're going to get such steady receiving outputs every week that every week you can rely on him. But on the ones where you know it's going to be a shootout, they're going to need points. I think Cole Kmet's going to really surprise this year in terms of being towards the top of the list in touchdowns. And if Jimmy Graham gets hurt or just is as useless as he's looked and the team finally just takes him off the field, Kmet really could as an every down guy. Like, this is like nibbling each other's cheese situation.
Yeah.
We had so many of those in yesterday's situation. The difference is, though, Cole Kmet goes undrafted mostly. I'm not paying a Dallas Goedert top 50, top 12 tight end price to get a Cole Kmet. You can stash him as your tight end 2, see what happens with him and Jimmy Graham. And if the touchdowns are flowing like you think, I think he could end up becoming a really viable weekly piece to rosters.
Yep, I got him on my short list of guys in my auction, which is happening tomorrow, that I'm hoping to get for maybe like $1, something like that. All right, that was the timer. That rounds out the Bears. We're going to go right into the Lions. Good time in there, Wolf. All right, Lions.
And this is as you're getting into this one, Nat, this is one of the more disgusting teams, but 1 to 2 players, though, that really, really intrigue me.
Yeah, I probably know who you're talking about, but we'll get into that in a second. I was going to say probably Swift and Hawkinson, and that's what you just put up on the screen.
Probably right.
Anyway, the Lions, we alluded to their horrible receiving core when we were talking about some of the bum receiving cores in the NFC days earlier, and after 2 days of anticipation, we're actually going to go into them. All right, but we're going to start with the leader of the ship, Jared Goff. Goff, you got down for 363 out of 560, a little over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, 14 picks. I have written next to him, I consider him a total non-factor in fantasy, a low-end guy in a 2-quarterback league. You got him as your quarterback 23 based on the projections, which is actually down a little bit. And then you got him, I think, as your 30 on the big board, which I think is probably more how you feel about him.
100% right, because in my projections, he might even be coming up like ahead of Trey Lance, who I might have only for a half season of stats. But I think those half seasons of stats are going to be so meaningful. I agree 100%.
Doesn't mean you would take him over that guy. You certainly wouldn't.
Never. Certainly not. And I think exactly how you describe him. Very low end QB2. Like in those, if you have a super flex league and he's sitting there, why not? There is the narrative that the Lions are going to blow, and I think that's a very true narrative. That
it's a strong narrative, right?
Very strong narrative. So he is going to have to chuck most likely. I really think, though, as you can see with my holistic team projections, minus 51 in league average and total plays, I think they're going to make their best attempt at slowing games down, bleeding clock, running until the doors are just so blown off that they have to chuck in the second half. And Goff just doesn't really have that great of an arm or that great of weaponry to do that much damage, even in these positive script scenarios that he's going to find. So as a desperation, best ball, last quarterback pick, there's going to be a couple 25-point weeks where he just throws 3 touchdowns because they have to be so bad. Maybe, right. He was good with Sean McVay. I mean, he had 3 top 10 seasons across 4 with Sean McVay, but this is a completely different defense. Completely different weapons. Like I think McVay covered a ton of his faults, and it's just a bridge to whenever they have their next future guy in the future, next year or whenever they draft him. There's no real reason to draft Jared Goff. That is not the sexiest aerial pie, and that's why these receiving core, there's not going to be a ton of guys we're really hyping up here.
We certainly will not be. We're going to be talking about the running backs real quick, and you are interested in DeAndre Swift, but then we will get into the main reason that despite Goff's past fantasy excellence, like you said, 3 top 10 seasons, he was throwing to different guys. And we're going to talk to you about the guys he is throwing to in just a second. But anyway, DeAndre Swift, you got him down for 216, almost 1,000 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns. More importantly, you got him for almost 70 catches for 545 and 4 touchdowns. Those numbers actually, I think, are down a little bit for you, but still substantial running back production out of the backfield catching balls. You had your numbers go up a little across the board for Swift, rushing specifically, but you did drop him a couple spots. He's now your running back 13 on the projection board, and you got him at 18 on the big board. You're projecting him essentially to split carries with Jamal Williams 60-40, something like that. It's a back by committee as far as I'm concerned. But then you do have him catching a lot more balls, although you do have Williams catching quite a few balls as well, maybe 50. I don't know. Is this just, that skyrockets his numbers? Is this just a pass catching thing? It seems like you don't really believe in him.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky things. I will say I believe in the player 100%. I believe in the talent. Every time he's gotten the opportunity, I mean, there's the stats. I tweeted it out. When he's seen 12 or more carries, he's averaged almost 20 fantasy points per game. He would have been like top 10 in that usage. So, and that's 12 or more. That's not even that heavy of usage.
No, it's not.
So the efficiency is 100% there. When he gets to work, he does damage. He's scoring all over the field, and he is amazing as a receiver. Maybe the best to come out of last year's class as a receiver. So I would not be shocked if he is right towards the list in terms of running back targets, running back receptions. In fact, they vacated over 65% of their targets from last year. So there is a wide open target totem pole, and I think this is their most talented player. They would be wise to structure everything around him. They're already coming out, though, and saying, Anthony Lynn, their offensive coordinator, Jamal Williams is my big A back. Like, he's the one that you're going to pound up the middle. He's good in pass protection, so he's going to be in there too. So it does, and that's why you see a pretty even split. Not even 50-50, but, nice.
60-40 is not nothing. That's not bell cow stuff. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention your numbers on Williams. You got him for about 60-40, or the 40 end of the carries, the yards, but you did recently bump his touchdowns on the ground from like 3 to 7.
Yeah, I think that might be how they want to use this guy. DeAndre Swift is not the biggest guy, so I wouldn't be shocked to see him cede those goal line snaps. Jamal Williams was the every down back when Swift missed their first preseason game. And I think the reason why I rank Swift a little bit lower than I project him for is these projections, of course, are over a 17-game season.
Right.
I don't think there's much of a chance we see Swift for all 17 games. He's already dealing with a groin injury in camp. Now, if we do, and you get this guy that I think could be the running back, as you said, 13 in fantasy at a 4th-round price right now as everyone's freaking about injuries, he could be a real league winner at that price. I still love going in at him in that late 3rd, early 4th range because there is so much upside in this talent and the available volume. Again, 65% of their targets vacated, 60% of their carries vacated with Kerryon Johnson and AP gone. There is the case for him to be an absolute monster. And Deuce Staley said we want to give him 25 touches a game. I don't buy a word he says. I don't believe that. He said the same thing for Miles Sanders last year, and that got us all nowhere. But I do think the upside is really high at his price. I just don't know that we'll see him for the amount of games to get him to that actual final statistical output.
All right, let's get into the receivers. And we are not really getting into the receivers because we think these guys are great fantasy options, but it's more like let's just marvel for a second about the receiving core that Jared Goff's going to be throwing to. So it's worth noting there have been a few changes as far as how you see these guys, the pecking order in the past. Yeah. You had Brashard Perryman as the captain of the ship, and then now it's Tyrell Williams. You even texted me. You said, I've changed it a little, now with Tyrell Williams being the target hog. Now, target hog numbers for Tyrell Williams put in through projections as your wide receiver 56. On your big board, 65, so you don't even like him that much. Perryman, you have as your wide receiver 83 by projections. This is like these guys are both, you got them both catching 57 balls, although Williams, you got getting about 800 yards, Perryman 550, and then 4 and 5 touchdowns respectively. Those are not lights out numbers. And then you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe as the third guy, 39 catches, 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. These are not exactly numbers that are blowing me away.
Nor should they be. 90 targets for your top receiver is not really a fantasy-like vein there. But there is always those receivers in those crappy wide receiver cores that we don't know who's the number one. You're looking at the Jets this year, the Saints until Michael Thomas comes back. And, of course, Detroit right here, right now. This was like the Terry McLaurin.
Except no one's coming back.
Right, exactly. There is nobody coming back for these guys. And in their first action, Tyrell Williams did see 4 targets from Jared Goff, led the team in terms of Jared Goff's targets, one of them coming in the end zone. And they're saying he's been the one most consistent, one available in camp, but also 2 just performance-wise. Tyrell Williams did have a 1,000-yard season just a couple years ago. He's been a little bit dinged up since then. But he's shown the ability to be a pretty big play, number one that can kind of do it all at like mediocre level. So out of this garbage depth chart, to me, he's the number one. he's worth like around 13, 14 stab in case he does become like an actual viable true number one. I think he's just the number one of a shitty core though, and it ultimately won't lead to too much value. I do think he's worth drafting. Everyone else here I'm pretty much ignoring, other than maybe a last round stab at St. Brown, because he is a rookie with some upside. They're already comparing him to Goff's next Cooper Kupp and can't. That's not going to happen.
Come on, man. There's no rookie here in this receiving core that's going to break through into prominence with Jared Goff and these other guys taking pressure away from them. That's just not going to happen. I agree. Williams is probably the best guy in this group, but it's a low bar.
Right. St. Brown is their slot weapon too. So like in 3 receiver sets, he'll play there. What I was concerned with though in the preseason is when I went to 2 receiver sets, rather than giving this guy extensive work, moving him all over the place, seeing what the rookie can do, they took him off those snaps, which I don't like to see. He could, again, be the most valuable. He's certainly the most upside of this group is St. Brown. Should he become an every down threat? Should he actually live up to that Cooper Kupp hype? But I don't buy it. I'm not seeing it myself. The main vein of this passing attack is who we're going to be talking about next.
I don't want to get too into the ins and outs, X's and O's of football because you're just that stuff in and out a lot better than I do. But aren't you going to stack the box against these guys?
Yeah.
I mean, are you going to be like, well, we don't want to get burned on the outside by Brashard Perryman?
Exactly. Right. I mean,
you have to think this is going to kill like everybody.
It really could. The only thing that would keep them from potentially doing that, though, is Perriman and Quintez Cephas. They both have like very viable speed. I'm not saying they're good, but they do have the speed to really burn down the field. So it's tough for me to like say that with a straight face. Like, yeah, they're really going to be threatening defenses. Like, but they do have the speed that you have to at least account for. And because they're going to be playing from behind so far, I think this is going to end up being like, yeah, exactly. Like it's going to be just a very easy offense to stop. And there's not going to be a whole ton of points coming out of this Detroit's team.
All right, one guy that we do both like, TJ Hawkinson at tight end. You got him for 84 catches, a little over 900 yards and 8 touchdowns and getting 123 targets, which is a lot of targets for a guy like him. You got him as your tight end 4 on projections. You also have him as your tight end 4 on the big board. Give me a couple seconds on Hawkinson because he's a guy I like too.
Oh, yeah, it's easy to like him, especially when he falls to round 6 right now and could be behind only like Kelsey, Kittle, Waller on the target totem pole among tight ends. And in fact, there's some of those guys like Kittle. He might see Hawkinson more targets than Kittle this year because he is truly the only real threatening option on this team. That 8 touchdowns would be by far a career high. For some reason, a big body and athletic guy, he hasn't really, similar to Kittle in that sense, they had a big touchdown season yet. So I'm projecting that to change this year with no real other threats in the red zone other than maybe Swift. So 924 yards, 84 receptions. It's just a volume bet here. That puts him up to my number 4 tight end in my rankings. And a lot of people going for Pitts in round 4. And I love the upside of Pitts. Don't get me wrong. I think I'd much rather take whatever receiver or running backs are available there. Because by round 6, it starts to really thin out there. Hawkinson's just a glaring value in my opinion. Again, 130-ish targets from the tight end position that late. All day. That's the one. Him and Swift are really the only 2 guys I'm genuinely trying to buy. Maybe Tyrell Williams late within this offense.
I'm not interested in Swift. I could be interested in the other guys. All right, let's talk about the Packers. Aaron Rodgers. He's a guy that's been moving up your board a decent amount in recent days. I learned as I was double checking my projections today. You got him at 395 out of 600. For a little over 4,700 yards, 34 touchdowns, 6 picks. That puts him as your quarterback 9 on projections, which I think is up from 13 just a few days ago. And you got him as your quarterback 8 on the big board. I actually think you're low on both. But why'd you move him up?
I think just the fact that he's there, active, engaged with the team finally again, led to me bumping up his statistics quite a bit. I've always projected them as if Rodgers was there, but a little more conservatively. So yeah, I bumped him up a little bit. The most recent, I do actually have him down to 4,365 yards.
What? When did you do this?
I don't know if you're looking at the my Wolf training camp update versus Wolf projection 1.
No, I'm doing the training camp update.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly when that happened. There was no real justification or reason for me lowering him other than I've gotten a little bit higher, more bullish on Aaron Jones having a monster season and him seeing a little more work this year. But yeah, there is that narrative that Rodgers has that last dance style season where he just goes berserk, wants to pad his stats, wants to pad Adam's stats as they enter this last season together before they both find greener pastures next year. There is that narrative. There is that ceiling. I just think after 42 touchdowns last year, he has to, you need that narrative to sustain what he did last year. I think he regresses like in between what he did in 2019, where he only threw like 25, 26 touchdowns between 41 touchdowns. I'm seeing a nice middle ground happening this year.
All right, fair enough. We'll talk about this when we get to the receivers with Rodgers, because I feel like there's, at least in my thinking, there's some discrepancy as far as the guy's going to throw for tons of yards. He's going to have a good season, but it seems like, all right, well, we'll talk about it a little bit now. It seems like you're going really, really heavy to Adams. I mean, like, I feel like you gifted him a few more touchdowns just in the past few days. I feel like he bumped from like 11 or 12 to now 15. But the other guys you're not giving much love to at all. And I understand that. There's 3 other guys that are just like kind of ho-hum, we'll see. I feel like one of those guys, and we're talking about Allen Lazard, MVS, and Randall Cobb, I feel like one of those guys you have to be really low on. And maybe it's just we don't know which guy that is.
Right. It's tough to project. I do think it's really just the Adams show, and I'm not really buying into it. We haven't seen Cobb have more than, 600. He hasn't hit 600 yards in 4 straight seasons. Even his last with Green Bay and Rodgers, he wasn't great. I know a lot of people hyped up that he's there again, and Rodgers vouched for him. He really wanted him, but I don't think Cobb brings much to the table at this stage. I would have liked Allen Lazard had Cobb not joined.
Yeah.
To me, it's just like all those guys are going to have decent weeks every now and again. I don't think any of them are just steady. In fact, there's a guy on this list who is not on this list. I'm a little bit more intrigued by, and that's Devin Funchess. He was signed there in 2019, got hurt, didn't play last year due to COVID. Last preseason game sees 8 targets, hauls in 6 of them for I think 80 yards it came down to, looking like his old self. Out of all these guys, Funchess by far brings more to the table in terms of complete route trees, in terms of size, in terms of red zone ability. So if he continues to carve out a role throughout this preseason, not only is that going to hurt these other guys, and that's why I think I started to bump them down a little bit, he himself would probably leap into this depth chart as I think the upside to be the number 2 in this offense. So as a last round dart throw, I don't really like Cobb, Lazard, or Scantling. Unless it's best ball, Scantling will have a few blow-up weeks and he'll get projected in your lineup. But otherwise, I think Funchess has the best bet to potentially carve himself out a nice sleeper role in this offense. And certainly if something ever happened to Adams, he has the most complete, like, big body receiver skill set to fill that void, in my opinion.
All right, that's a good tip. That's interesting. And just to be clear, and I mean, who knows if my numbers are even right at this point, but you do have Adams as your wide receiver 2 on projections, but your wide receiver 1 on the big board. You got him catching over 120 balls and getting like 180 targets, something crazy like that.
Almost last year, right?
No, I'm not saying crazy like you were wrong. I'm just saying those are pretty crazy numbers.
It is insane.
Almost 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. Those are big, big, big numbers.
Big numbers from a guy that did it all last year. I think he set the record or was second best, maybe behind only Moss that season in terms of fantasy points per game, because he missed a couple and he still put up 16, 17 touchdowns. I don't know that regresses. When they get in close, they just dial his number. There's multiple times where they'll go for the fade on first down and the goal line miss it, and then Rodgers goes right back to it.
And then go back to it again. Yeah,
it's unstoppable, the connection and rapport they have. And like I said, if that last dance narrative comes true, Adams and him will have a very, very special season. I love, if I'm not going running back in round 1, like if I'm right around 6, 7, I love getting either Kelsey or Adams. As we said earlier, with the running backs, there are some good guys in round 3 to round out your stable. If you want to go an elite pass catcher like Adams or Kelsey there, I have no problem with it. And I'm drafting at 7 in my main league. I'm hoping I get Adams. I hope no one's watching it right now. But I'm hoping Adams falls to me. I love this guy. I think he's going to have a monster season. How do you not love this guy? I mean, he's amazing.
No, he's great. He's the best guy going probably. Yeah. All right. So we did skip a pretty important fantasy guy at running back, Aaron Jones. You've got him as your RB6 on both lists. And again, hopefully my numbers here are right. 266 for 1264 and 11 touchdowns, adding a little over 40 catches for over 300 yards and another 3 touchdowns. The last update I saw, you had him carrying less than twice as much as A.J. Dillon, but being a big force in the passing game, whereas Dillon is pretty much a nothing there. And certainly we've seen the Packers misuse Jones before. But I think his fantasy value to me ends up being pretty touchdown dependent. I mean, I know that's not a hot take. That's true with a lot of people. Do you see that as the case?
I think with Dillon, yes. Jones, I think because we have Jamal Williams gone now, Jones did run more routes than Williams, but Williams still saw right around 190 routes run last year. He saw about 150 total touches between carries and targets. And I think some of those carries will definitely filter down to Dillon, but I think a lot of the receiving work is going to go to Jones, who's so much more dangerous as a threat in the passing game than Williams ever was. He has been so efficient whenever he's used in the pass game. So with this little bump in receiving, it sends his ceiling through the roof. He's been the running back 2 and running back 5 in back-to-back seasons within this LaFleur zone blocking scheme. He's just so deadly. And to me, if you miss out on like the big 3 at the top, your Henry, Cook, C-Mac, then I like Zeke a little more than Aaron Jones. But after that, it's really hard for me to argue anyone ahead of Aaron Jones. He is so steady, consistent, with a big ceiling, a decent floor as well. There's a little bit of an injury concern. But yeah, with this receiving work that could be filtering to him, I have him shooting up the projections because of it.
All right, and we're going to hit some of these, but Charlie Prebz just commented, Adams is the goal line guy.
Oh yeah, he really is. Like, good to see you too, Preble. We got the steady guys coming to all these shows, which I love to see. It's amazing.
Yeah. All right, Tonyan at tight end, Robert Tonyan. You got him for a little over 50 catches, almost 600 yards receiving, 6 touchdowns. To me, that seems about right. To me, he's not a bad wait on a tight end and get this guy if you end up punting on the position. I don't know. You got him as your tight end 13, I think, on projections, and 10 on the big board.
Seems about right to me. Yeah, I mean, he was the tight end 3 in fantasy last year, which is psychotic, but that was on the back of 13 touchdowns. I don't expect that again. I think some of those go to Aaron Jones. Some of those go to A.J. Dillon, who could be an absolute monster at the stripe, even if he's a 0 as a receiver. I don't see Tonyan having that type of season again. There is the narrative, like, well, what if we haven't seen the best of Tonyan? He is a good athlete. He works with Kittle in the offseason. I mean, there is that. But now the fact that they added Cobb, Funchess is back, like, I think that was a product of truly there was no one else besides Adams for him to go to consistently last year, because MVS was always banged up. Lazard was always banged up. So Tonyan kind of became the de facto number 2. I just don't see that happening 2 seasons in a row.
All right, fair enough. We're going to move on to the last team in the division, the Minnesota Vikings, piloted by Kirk Cousins. 366 completions out of 529 attempts. A little under 4,700 yards, 34 touchdowns, 13 picks. Now, you did actually have his touchdown numbers come up a little bit, but you dropped him on your overall list a tiny bit. You got him as your quarterback 17 on projections, all the way down at 21 on the big board. So it's not like this is a guy you're really excited about. And
I think this is another, whether you're catching our projection series for the first time or this is you're here with us every single day, this is a reminder that he's up towards the top of my list in passing yards and touchdowns, and still only 17 in projections, which goes to show you like how nuts and how valuable that is to have that good old the good old Russian Konami code upside there. So ultimately, I do not expect a massive fantasy season from him, even if I expect some nice, steady, high floor. Like, he's a good guy to balance out if you're waiting on a Justin Fields, if you're waiting on a Trey Lance. Okay, he fits that. I prefer Ryan Fitzpatrick, but still he fits that kind of bill of that type of guy. But yeah, just nothing exciting, and it's just a good reminder of how valuable those rushing stats are.
All right, let's talk about a guy who's super valuable by any metric, which is Dalvin Cook.
Ooh.
All right, Dalvin Cook, he's actually come up a little bit recently, although there wasn't much further for him to come up on your list. You got him as your running back 2 on the projection list. I think you have him at 3 on the big board. You got him getting a massive 326 carries, over 1,600 yards on the ground, 14 touchdowns, adding over 50 catches, 400 yards, and 2 touchdowns receiving. Now, you have him getting a massive workload and putting up pretty big numbers, both rushing and receiving. You've also got Alexander Madison getting over 100 carries and getting a decent clip on that. You see this as just regular in-game production. You're not hedging for an injury here, right?
No, right, exactly. That's just regular in-game production because of how massive this ground pie is. They're built on the backbone of that Gary Kubiak zone scheme. I expect them to be one of the heaviest run teams they were last year. I think they're going to do so again. I think when you mention injury, you have to mention that with Dalvin Cook, who's missed time in every single professional season. That's the worry here. That's why I have him at 3 instead of 2. If he plays all 16 games, he could threaten Christian McCaffrey for the top spot, given how just dynamite he is in this zone blocking scheme and just as a player in general. He led the league in goal line attempts last year. I think that is very well within his reach again this season, hence the 14 TDs. He's great as a receiver, hence why in PPR leagues you might want to consider him over the King Henry. Half PPR, you might even want to as well if you think this guy can sustain all 17 games. I do get worried about that injury history. I've been, had my heart broken by Dalvin Cook before, so I do carry a little trepidation with that. But still, there is any qualms with what this guy can do on the field, any qualms with his workload. He is just a monster. It's just a matter of health.
All right. Let's get into another guy who's very high on the list, and that's Justin Jefferson, who I mentioned earlier. I made a comp to A-Rob, and you've got him as your wide receiver 4 projection. You had A-Rob at 9. You have him as your 6th guy on the big board. You have A-Rob, I think, at 13, or maybe it's backwards. It might be 13 and 9 the other way. But either way, you got him ranked quite a bit higher on both of those. Now, if you look at stats, you got Jefferson getting the same number of catches on the same number of targets. The only difference is you got him pulling in a couple more touchdowns and getting like 250 more yards. That's it. I mean, he's getting the same number of targets, the same number of catches. So I don't know. I know these are projections. These are not written in stone or anything like that, but I feel like that makes my point a little bit. Now, also, so you're going to talk about Jefferson in a second. Adam Thielen, you've got him as your wide receiver 23 on both lists, also getting 140 targets, by the way. Pulling in 86 to 90 balls, 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. I don't know, man. Thielen's always just there sucking up fantasy points, isn't he?
He really is. He's become just one of those, like, I want to write a series, and maybe JT's writing it this year, called Unsexy Upside. Like,
he's so unsexy.
Nobody's looking like, I can't wait to get Thielen, right? But he falls to round 5 often. You can get him as your 3 or even 2 if you've gone horse, or Kelsey. And he's going to be steady. Like, he is going to – last year they were right around these target projections. I have 28% share, 24% share. Those were a little bit closer. This is saying I think Jefferson takes another step and sees a little more work than Thielen. They were more neck and neck last year. But even still, 130 targets for a good, talented receiver that – he's towards the back 9 of his career, but still getting it done, especially as a red zone threat. He is dangerous out there. So I love Thielen's value, late 4th, early 5th. I love where he's going, but I also love Jefferson, late 2nd. As you said, my projections have him coming out as the wide receiver 4, and I don't have him quite that high because he is only a sophomore. He's a little dinged up in camp. There's definitely question marks. Will he do it again? I think so, though. He's the type of guy, hard-ass worker, like just been on the grind all year trying to become one of the best. He's laughing at the people that think he's going to regress and like talks about how he pins it all up. One of those types of guys, the real grinders that just is fed by the doubt. And I like that. I think he's going to come right back out there. 1480 is right around what he did last year. I'm just projecting a little bit more touchdowns there as he refines his deep game. Both of those guys at their prices, late 2nd, early 3rd for Justin Jefferson, and late 4th, early 5th for Thielen are complete steals because as you look at there, after them, I think Chad Beebe, wide receiver 3, 7% target share. Like, there's nothing. The tight end is dangerous, and we'll talk about him in a second. But yeah, I'm all in on Jefferson and Thielen at their prices this year.
And like you mentioned, at tight end, Irv Smith Jr., he's gotten a little bump from you lately. You got him as your tight end 12 on your projections and your tight end 11 on the big board. 55 catches, 682, 8 touchdowns is the last numbers I have for him. Kyle Rudolph now out of town. I wouldn't be too unhappy if I waited on a tight end and I got him.
I'm with you 100%. Like I said yesterday, Logan Thomas is kind of my cutoff. I want Logan Thomas. If I go any lower, I'm starting to get sick. Smith is one that I could get a little bit excited about owning. He is an athletic freak, a big body, lineage, the genetics with him. He got all that going for him. And every single day there's a new report, another 2-touchdown day for Irv Smith in the red zone. He is just dynamite in that area. We already seen that on the NFL field, but him and Rudolph were constantly nibbling each other's cheese. Well, now Rudolph's gone. And so there's no more cheese nibbling for Smith. At 76 targets is pretty low. And that's just because I think Thielen and Jefferson just dominate this workload like they did last year. But I think this guy could be so efficient as a scorer that 76 targets is all he's really going to need to be a top 12 fantasy tight end. I'll get him all day. If I miss on Smith, if I miss on Thomas rather, Smith is kind of that next guy. Like, I better get him or else I'm really feeling about my tight ends. So yeah, I love Smith. And even if I have a number 1 tight end already, like if I have Logan Thomas, I don't mind taking Smith in that 12th round range where he's going right now because I think the touchdown equity, the touchdown upside is so high at that price tag.
All right. That's the NFC North, guys.
Oh, yeah. Look at us. Look at us. 3 divisions down, Matt. We're almost halfway done already.
I know. I wish, you know how there's pictures of the presidents and they start their term and then there's pictures of them at the end of, like, say they do 2 terms and they look like they're like 30 years older. I feel like by the end of this series, I'm going to be, looking like I'm like 5-6 years old.
I took the projections off and saw my face. My hair's drooping, like my sweat's all over. I'm going.
Once we hit the big time, we're going to be able to afford Botox and stuff, right?
I keep forgetting to move the projection thing too. Oops, that was my fault this episode, guys. My fault. But yes, exactly. We'll get that Botox soon enough, Matt.
It's going to help some of us on the older end.
Alrighty, guys. Another projection in the book. 3 of 8 down, 5 more to go. It's been a blast. I think what makes it, I don't know if you agree with me, Truth, but what makes it like not easier, I love doing it anyways, but just like better is the fact that the same 6 people are always here no matter what. We're getting new people in and interacting as well. But it's like, you're going to see Preble, you're going to see Chavez, like all these guys, Samuel starting to show up more and more, ML and Michael, like all these guys. Of course, Tunes we know is going to be there. But it's just awesome to see your guys, like more and more.
Yeah.
You feel the same way?
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's fun. You always know you're going to get some interaction from some of the same guys. And like you said, some new guys showing up all the time. Makes it fun. I enjoy it. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. You can find it here 1:30 p.m. every day. Eastern time, maybe a couple minutes later as we finalize our notes, but we'll always be right around that time for these future projection series. You can find all our content at roastreetjournal.com. We breed and feed fantasy wolves or the fantasy fullback dive. We paved your path to 2021 titles. You can find me as well at Roto Street Wolf. Always updating the big board. These projections, even if it pisses Nat off, they're always changing because the market is always changing in fantasy, and you need the most up-to-date stuff, guys. So follow me along. Follow Roto Street Journal. I am the Wolf.
I'm the Truth.
In a world full of fancy sheep, be the wolf, guys. Later.
Later.